Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I am coming back with another look for the new Natasha Denona Bronze eyeshadow palette, and I'm gonna create this beautiful smoky eye. I love it, so I'm looking forward to show you how to create it. After showing you how to create this look, I am going to do comparison swatches for each shade of the palette. And for this, I digged into all my Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes, at least, well, those ones. Like I have minis and I have like the very original big 28 pans, but I know a lot of you have those, so I did not dig into those. And I'm also comparing a few shades with the Divine Rose 1 and 2. I'm going to talk a tiny bit about the Bronze Cheek Face Glow palette that I've been putting to the test again today. If you haven't watched my previous video, I created 4 looks for the bronze palette, and I do a full demo for this little guy right here. So if you want to see how to create this look and see all those comparison swatches for each individual shades, it was a bit daunting, so it took a while, but I successfully condensed it, I think, enough for you to enjoy and not fall asleep. We'll see, let me know. And hopefully it will be helpful, because I know a lot of you were thinking, okay, I have the Metropolis eyeshadow palette, do I need that one? Hopefully you'll see, maybe if you have any of these eyeshadow palettes at home, if you need that bronze palette, I hope it will be helpful. If you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel and also follow me on Instagram. Don't forget to click the little bell right here next to the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new uploads. Thank you so much for watching. Without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, so my base is done, and I wanted to play a bit more with the Bronze Cheek Face Glow palette. Once again, if you haven't watched my first impressions, like 4 looks 1 palette video, I will link it right here, or you'll see the icon at the end of this video. But if you watched it, you saw that I was not like super impressed by this one in particular in the palette. I found like it's supposed to be a bouncy formula, fine, but it looks almost like more mattifying than glowy on my skin. It looked more mattifying. There's like a slight pink shift to it. Anyway, I wanted to play more with it, and today it was okay. I applied it on top of a base that was a bit more hydrated, and I used the cream bronzer, the Fenty one, and it worked a bit better. So I think you have to have like a cream base if you want it to work. Now I'm not like super impressed by that formula. The Blush and Glow, I still really like it. I applied it a bit more lightly today, and I used the Super Glow Nude highlighter on top. It's a nice face palette. I don't know if it will suit fair skin tones. Let me know if you're fair to light, if it works for you. She says you can use those shades as well on the eyes, but well, little feedback on that Face Glow palette. So I'm gonna create a look quickly, and then we'll jump onto the swatches. Today I wanted to use a deep shade as a base and play with Bliss on top. If you watch my previous video, once again, I'm talking about the fact that Bliss, this guy right here, is a beautiful transformative shade. It's a duochrome shade, and I wish she had a bit more of that in that palette, as well as for like a dark shadow and maybe a highlight inner corner shade. So I'm gonna go to the shade Deep Dive, and I did a mistake here. I placed a tiny bit of concealer on my lids. I didn't want to, but I forgot. But that will be, it's okay. It's okay. We're gonna make it work. So I'm gonna go with a brush. This is a Steel Spa Essential Détente brush, like something a bit dense, you know, works well with cream shadows. And I'm gonna apply it all over the lid. And what I like with this type of formula that you find also in the Metropolis palette and I believe a Biba palette, it's pigmented, but it's super easy to blend, super easy to work with, and once it sets, it doesn't move. You can create a smoky eye like super quickly. I really like the smoky eye I created in my Faux Looks one palette. I'm gonna go pretty high right there. Okay, let's go for a second layer, assisting in the outer corner. And of course you can use your fingers too. I might do that after, but this is a bit less messy with a brush. Okay, we're actually going to use the same shade on the lower lash line. What I really like with this type of formula as well is you don't have any fallout. Then finish with a finger. I really like that shade. It has a bit of a plum in it. Super pretty. Makes my green eyes pop. So now I'm going to apply the shade Bliss with my finger in the center of the lid. And when I did the test on my palm in the other video, that shade that kind of looks like peachy duochrome turned out like to be almost like a lime color. It was beautiful. Look at that. So much fun. So pretty. Totally transforms that shade. Well, they transform each other, I guess. Look at that. It's like that beautiful lime green shift. And I know a lot of you commented that these shades are too similar, which I agree. Like, this is like for a bronze lover, right? You're not gonna have like super bright shades. I said like I'm missing more like dark shades in it, but you can play with this one in particular and do something like this. That's very full. We're feeling really full right now. Let's do a second layer in the center. That's super pretty. Wow, I wish she put more duochromes. I always loved Natasha Denona's like duochromes. She's really good at it. We'll probably see in her next launch a trichrome or trichrome shade, since Mother Pat did it now. When lots of indie brands have done it before, but we know that, but looking forward to it. Look at that. So cool. I could blend a tiny bit more. I went quite high with that cream shadow, so I think I'm gonna pick up the shade Ridge, just to bring a tiny bit of a warmth. And bringing it like quite high, like the typical Natasha Denona look. She always goes like full on blown out, like towards the eyebrows, I find. And our mattes are super blendable and also buildable. Blendable and buildable. And we're gonna do the same with a smaller brush on the lower lash line. Well, I'm gonna add a bit of concealer just because it's a look that calls for a tiny bit more coverage. I'm gonna pop a little highlighter in the inner corner, finish the look, and I'll be right back to see if we need to add something. Alright, and that is the final look. I love it. Of course, you can wear false lashes if you want to. Someone commented on my latest video. Yes, my lashes are not as good during pregnancy and they don't want to curl. And sorry, but I cannot bother with lashes right now. But if you feel like it, feel free to add some. I'm gonna show you with a flashlight because this is way more sparkly than it looks. Look at that. It's so beautiful. I love that look and I find it like very simple. It's 3 shades plus a little inner corner highlight here with any highlighter you have at home. In my waterline, I choose to put something a tiny bit eggplant color, you know. It's between a brown and a purple. And this is the Stila Smudge Stick Waterproof Eyeliner in the shade Black Amethyst. And then I decided to do a very thin liner just all along the lashes, and for this I use the Anastasia Beverly Hills liquid liner, and this is so good, guys. I forgot how good it is. It has a very nice applicator. You can do something very precise with this. Really enjoy that. And for mascara, I use the Anastasia Beverly Hills Lash Brag Volume Mascara for my poor lashes that don't want to curl. So yeah, it's not bad, not bad. On my lips, I used a lip liner from Morphe. This is the shade Love Bite. And I paired it with the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude in the shade Susanna. Super pretty color. I really love that paired with that eye look. I think it's beautiful. So there you have it. Easy smoky eye look using the bronze palette. And I really love it. Love its simplicity, how fast it is, and the impact. So easy. I'll probably face the daylight, take the camera and go. It's not sunny once again today. It's kind of a crappy weather, but this is how it looks like facing daylight. And it's always when I'm in my dressing room that I see how glittery, sparkly the shadows are. So there you have it. The light is not the greatest, but you can see all these beautiful micro glitters here from the shade Bliss. Oh, it's so pretty. Look at that. And this is a beautiful fall look as well. I'm gonna stop talking and we're gonna jump onto the comparison swatches with my Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes. I used mostly the big ones. I didn't pick up the minis. I also compared with the Pat McGrath Labs Divine Rose 1 and 2 for 1 or 2 shades only. But let's go for comparison swatches and I'll get back to you at the end of it. Alright, as you can see, it's a bit of a mess here. I have all the palettes I want to compare it to, and so let's go for it. So the first one everybody requested is the Metropolis eyeshadow palette, and for this I found that Rust and maybe Helena were similar to True Copper. So here the first shade on the left is True Copper from the bronze palette. Then the second one is the shade Rust. And the third one is Helena from the Metropolis palette. So you can see that Rust has a bit more orange and Helena is a bit more pink. They're not far, of course, but it's little details. I compared it to the Sunset palette, and here you can see that these will be beautiful together. And in the Sunset palette, I found the shade Bronzage, which is this one, the closest to True Copper. And this is how it looks when I swatched it. So that's the fourth shade. And it's actually a bit more of a rose gold. Then the Sunrise palette, and for this one I found maybe Day Spring was maybe similar, and this is how it looks like. It's not as orangey. Then I found nothing in the Biba palette that was similar to True Copper, but I decided to get out my Pat McGrath Labs Divine Rose 2, and I found that this shade, Bronze Rosé 005, looked a bit similar. And when I swatched it, similar but a bit lighter shade, and it has more reflects to it. So that is all for the shade True Copper. So for the shade Suntan, this one, in the Metropolis I found the shade Pure, although it's not the same formula. This is like a cream to powder. So here the first shade is Suntan, and then I swatched Pure from the Metropolis palette. And so it's a cream to powder formula first of all, and then it's a tiny bit warmer as well, but close. That's all I could find in the Metropolis palette. Then in the Safari I found the shade Amara was maybe close to it, and this is how Amara looks like swatched. A bit more pink, but close. Then the Biba palette, and in this one I found a few actually. I found the shade Buff, Tone, Freckle, Rayon, and I swatched Pasha too. And so when you look at them, first, well, the shade Buff is not as brown. It's actually close to Amara, but a bit darker. Then the shade Tone is not as pigmented as it looks on the pan, so it's way more peachy and lighter. Then Freckle is more like a lighter, cooler brown. It's almost look green. Rayon is a cream to powder formula, and it has more blue, I would say. It will be as dark, but way more blue. Pasha is deeper and has kind of a plum undertone. Then in the Sunset palette, I thought maybe Sinai would be kind of similar. Well, you can see that it's actually a bit more orangey on the pan, and it's definitely more orangey when you swatch it. So that is all for the shade Suntan. Alright, so for the shade Sundown, I found in the Safari palette, well, because we just put it on like the shade Tone, I thought it would be close, and the shade Horizon. Tone is actually a bit more pigmented, it's not far, and the shade Horizon is actually really close. Then I compared it to the Sunrise palette, and I also found two. I found Morning, but this was way lighter, and then the shade Morgan, that is more pink, as you can see here. And lastly, I found something similar in the Safari palette. I found the shade Desert Date, quite close, and as you can see on the swatches, it's actually really close. I would say Desert Date is a bit more pigmented. For the shade Deep Dive, I found in the Safari palette the shade Voodoo, which is super close. The first shade here is Deep Dive, and then you have Voodoo. And yeah, they are quite close. It's just the formula that is different. Deep Dive is a cream to powder. And in the Lila palette, I found the shade Layla. Maybe I thought it would be close, but this is a shimmery shade and it's not as plummy. But then this shade in particular made me think of a rhodium. So this one over there. But you can see that rhodium has a bit of a duochrome effect actually, and it's quite different, and I couldn't find anything close for it except maybe Vivid from the Lila palette still, but still Vivid is way more purple, although it's kind of a duochrome shade like with a bronze base. But yeah, I couldn't find anything close to rhodium. Alright, for the shade Magma, which is right here, I found the shade Pasha in the Biba palette and Rayon. And as you can see, Pasha is really close. Rayon not as pigmented, it's kind of a cream to powder formula as well. In the Sunset palette, I found the shade Volcano. Very close, more pigmented, and maybe not as red as Magma. And I found in the Divine Rose from Pat McGrath Labs the shade Extreme Mahogany, quite close as well. Not as warm, it's a bit more plum. For the shade High Degree, I found the shade Crest in the Metropolis palette. And so the first shade here is High Degree from the Bronze palette, and the second one is Crest. And then I found in the Lila palette, or Lila, the shade Cyclone. And this is how the shade looks like. Actually closer to Crest than it is to High Degree, but that's all I could find. So for the shade Alloy, I wanted to compare it in the Sunset palette to the shades Obad and Mandarin. I didn't select Mandarin first, but then when I swatched it, I was like, oh, okay, there are some similarities. And here you can see, so the shade Alloy on the far left, then Obad or Obade, and then Mandarin. Way more orangey, but there's a shift to it where it looks similar. In the gold palette, the golds are actually really yellow or green. There's one shade I thought could work, and this was the shade Alchemist. And here, Alchemist is number 4, so a bit more of a cooler tone. In the Metropolis, there's actually the 2 shades that are the closest, I think. You have the shade Blaze and Penny. And these are the shades number 5 and 6 here, Blaze and Penny. But still, not quite exactly the same. I would say Alloy is more of an orangey, like a real bronze. And then, once again, the shade Bronze Rosé 005. I wanted to swatch it against that one. And it's close. I would say that it's not as warm. This is if I have to be like really picky. It's not as warm, but kind of the same finish, I think it's still a bit more sparkly than Alloy. A bit more shiny, but yeah, here it allows you to see also Natasha Denona against McGrath Labs, I guess. Okay, so for the shade Ridge, I found the shade Prairie in the Biba palette, Tamarind in the Safari palette, Sandstone and Teak in the Gold palette. In the Metropolis palette, I found the shade Rope. I tried Rhizome, and finally the shade Stain. So funny, so I just took a photo with a flash, and once I did, I was like, no, what am I saying? The closest shades are actually the last few ones, so from the Metropolis palette. But it's so funny, here it looks warmer. But yes, the last three shades from the Metropolis palette, Rope, Rhizome, and Stain, are actually the closest to the shade Ridge. Okay, so for the shade True Bronze, I found in the Metropolis palette the shade Blaze once again. In the Sunset palette, the shade Obeyed, or Obad. I don't know if she refers to the lingerie brand or not. And in the Sunrise palette, Dayspring. And as you can see, they are quite close. Especially on that photo with the flash. Alright, so for both the shades Gloaming and Bliss from the Bronze palette, I compared them to, so in the Sunrise, the Azalea, in the Sunset to Morgana, Bronzage, and Atmosphere, and Atmosphere was actually quite close to Gloaming. And in the Metropolis Crust, they're quite close. And in the Lila palette, I compared it to the shade Cyclone, which is actually quite close to the shades Azalea and Morgana. Yeah, you can see like they're all very close. Then for the shade Palladium, I compared it to the shade Atmosphere from the Sunset palette, Helio in the Lila or Lila palette, and Shine in the Biba palette. And I couldn't find a match. For the shade Bliss, which is a beautiful duochrome, I compared it to the shade VR Rose Venus in the Divine Rose 1 from McGrath Labs. I don't know why, I just wanted to swatch this one, just because it's such a beautiful shade, from the Ritualistic Rose Quad, Astral Rose Orchid, also from McGrath Labs, and the shade Awakening from the Sunrise palette. And VR Rose Venus is close, but the shift is way more lime, golden lime. Let's see with a photo with flash. For the shade Silk, I compared it to the shade Magnolia in the Biba palette, and it's actually quite close. I compared it to the Sunset palette and the shade Bronzage. And then in the Metropolis, I compared it to the shade Elena and Mace. This is what we got here. Alright, and for the shade Beach, the last shade. I found in the gold palette the shade Aria, and in the Biba palette the shade Freckle. Here are the comparison swatches for Beach. And that is all, you guys. That took a while. Conclusion after swatching all these beauties. If you have most of these palettes, do you need the bronze palette? Of course not. Of course not. If you don't and you love these shades, this is a gorgeous palette. Now, there's not a big diversity of shades here. You're not going to be able to create a multitude of different looks that are like super impactful. Well, I don't want to say impactful, super colorful, super contrasted. It's something, honestly, if you love these shades, you'll use all these shadows. You'll use them. And there's not going to be like something in the pan that you're never going to touch. Now, I would say once again that I'm missing few deeper shades just to intensify in the outer corner. I always love to do that. Now it's really if I'm like sticking to this palette exclusively. Otherwise, of course, I can dig in my other eyeshadow palettes and pair them together. You saw that this would look gorgeous with the Sunset palette. It will look gorgeous with paired with the all matte eyeshadow palette, the Biba palette. Like they all would look good paired together. And oh, I noticed also when I was like putting palettes next to each other, the Metropolis palette will look so good with a gold palette. They look so good together. Anyway, that's a little parenthèse in French. I wish there were more duochromes or trichromes. Why not in this palette? But overall, it's very pretty. Now, if you have those shades at home, no, you don't need that palette, of course, of course. I hope the comparison swatches helped you and also that it kind of maybe encouraged you to dig out your older eyeshadow palettes from Natasha Denona because these are beautiful. And I have to say, when I swatch the mattes in the Biba, in the all matte, and even like the sunset palette, which is quite old, guys. It's probably expired, but I don't know. It's very dry here in Alberta, so I'm not too worried. They swatch beautifully. They're so pigmented and creamy, like buttery, you know. So nice. So I hope it maybe inspires you to dig out your eyeshadow palettes. When I looked at the Metropolis, I know a lot of you don't really love that palette. I really like it. I think it's beautiful, especially for fall. And I really like the cream to powder formula once again. Anyway, so the palette, beautiful if you love those tones. If you're waiting for a cool tone eyeshadow palette from Natasha Denona, I'm pretty sure will come. That mini retro, I think, was a big success, so hopefully she will come with a big sister. The Bronze Chic Face Glow palette, once again, it's gorgeous. Like, these 3 shades, gorgeous. This one, tiny bit tricky. I don't know if you have darker skin tone, let me know how it goes on you. But I find right now, so far, the best was like a dewy skin and applied with a duo fiber brush. And that's it, my friends, for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe once again and to follow me on Instagram. Take care, have a great one, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.